All right, as everyone starts filling in, it's good to see you, Mark.
Oh, good to see you, Sean.
Yeah, the last time I saw you, we were having lunch in Shanghai. And you made it back to London safely.
Yeah. Well,
Are you locked
lunch
in the
was
room too?
not in a restaurant. Yeah. No, I'm no longer locked in a room. I'm allowed to do whatever I like. I've got freedom.
I myself, as I am in the office, so I am also, able to move around. And it has been a while since we've done one of these, so I want to, say hi to everybody, welcome everybody back. I think there are a lot of things that we need to talk about. As you can see, today's episode of Art of Law, which I'll get to in a little bit, is balancing HQ oversight and local management. But we have rebranded the China Art of Law. Isn't that right, Mark? We've had about 3 one-hour sessions during the lockdown to iron out the details, and this is the vision that we came up with here. this logo, which you created, Mark.
Yeah, I think I can improve on it now. I have greater technology, so I will revisit this at some stage.
Everybody, the chat is always open if you want to ask any questions or comment on anything. We always keep an eye on the chat. But yeah, I mean, like I said, we were having during the lulls of the lockdown, we were having a lot of conversations about the rebranding, and I'm glad that we did it. As some of you may know, but Mark has also started a email newsletter on Substack. In addition to the YouTube channel, we also have a link here to the newsletter sign up. So everybody who registered for this webinar on Eventbrite will get a copy of the PDF. So the links will be all clickable, and you can review the slides. So if you haven't signed up for that,
all these things very needy.
Yeah, I'm a big shill for the Substack. No, I like your email newsletter actually, Mark. I think it's I can't get enough of the shop, so early in the morning, right in my mailbox, that's where I get it. So sign up for that, send it to a friend as well.
Yeah.
All right. So
I think most people that read it don't have friends.
So before we get into the nitty gritty about the HQ, oversight versus local management, I mean, it has been a couple months since we've done one of these, Mark, and I guess the question is that we've been hearing is where have we been? Where has it? What were we doing, Mark? I think I put a couple slides here. I think the last time, well, I'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so if anyone hasn't heard, a lot of China has been locked down during the first half of this year. Here are some pictures. Xi'an, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Beijing. I mean, just about every big city has had some form of lockdown or restrictions placed on them during this year. Shanghai, got a lot of it, but we've emerged from that as you can see, I'm in the office and Mark made it back home. Yeah, even I searched. I was trying to search how many cities. An NPR article here says 45 cities have been in some sort of lockdown. So yeah, and the last time we had an Art of Law scheduled, Mark. I don't know if you remember. Yeah, so I'll tell everybody. I'll tell everybody. I'll tell everybody the story. So we had an Art of Law set up a few months ago. Maybe some of you were registered for that, and we were ready to go. You were in your hotel room. I was in my house during lockdown, and I was already online, getting ready to set up, all of the stuff for the meeting, for the webinar. And you called, and well, go ahead. You just let everybody know what happened.
Well, I think I remembered that I had got the test result. Yeah, you check your app, and my thing went from green to red, So so that was the test. So then I quickly did a rapid antigen test, and it was 2 lines. And I had thought at this stage I couldn't catch COVID because I was in Europe for like you know, a year, and everybody had COVID that I knew except for me. So I thought I was like you know, somehow immune to COVID. And I think one of the funny, and I was saying to people, you know, I wasn't really scared of COVID. I was scared of what the government would do if they catch you with COVID. And then I found out it was only half true. I also was scared of COVID because once you catch it, yeah, your first instinct is shit, you know, is this going to be bad? And for me, it was just a blocked nose. But then the CDC, the Chinese disease control guys, they phoned me up and said, oh, we're coming to get you. So then I was not in a mental state to do the webinar. But yeah, they didn't turn up on the first night. They turned up the next morning. But yeah, that was, and then I got to go to the resort.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what was happening on my side during that time. So you called me 5 minutes before the webinar was supposed to start. And then you just said, oh, I got a call from the CDC. They're coming to get me. And then I was like, well, you know, I should probably let everybody know that we will probably postpone this thing. And then I think you know, you called me an hour later or something like that. And I said, well, you know, yeah, I postponed it. And then you said, oh, I'm surprised you just didn't go on without me. And I just, this is, you know, this is China Chit Chat Art of Law. This is all about you, Mark. So could not do that without you. But yeah, we have some pictures here from your trip to the resort. If you want to
Yeah, it
walk us
wasn't
through.
that bad. Yeah, the guys in the white outfits, you know, the Dabai, yeah, they were all very friendly. It was run by the Anhui doctors, etc., and it was in an expo center. So I've forgotten if you have the photos, but my secretary Gracie had told me I was going to this like Swiss cottage in a field. They had these photos. I don't know if you've got those photos,
No,
but so I got in the thing and I was laughing the whole time because in the bus, a lot of people were very scared, and they were scared because they didn't know. Like I thought we're going to this Chongming Island foreigner hospital with little, you know, little wooden houses in a green field and 2 people per room. And then we turn up at the exhibition center, and I was a bit surprised because it didn't look like a little cottage. And then yeah, it took a while to realize that we were going in there. And it wasn't too bad. It was just the shock. And I've forgotten the lady's name, but the woman from the vice minister from Beijing who came down and just closed everything, she actually was there on the day. And so, yeah, so they had like about, I think, 4 different like buildings, and per building there was 750 beds, like in this kind of stuff. And then some of the stuff, if you just, yeah, so these are people coming in, you know, God knows what that guy's been. He wanted to paint something, I don't know. But anyway, you had a room with a bed that was not very comfortable, but yeah, it was okay. And then you had like a power charger, and you had like not too great Wi-Fi, and you had like a little cupboard for your stuff. So yeah, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't the Hilton, but it wasn't that. It reminded me of being back at university in China, so it was okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just some pictures here. You were there for a week.
That only happened once, you know. In the media, they were always like acting like these people were doing it. I only saw this once in 8 days that these people did the Tai Chi dancing type stuff. So most of the time, everybody just laid on their beds looking up in the air. So that was...
Well, it's good to see the AIs dancing. As far as me, as far as a lot of us, it was mostly a loop of boredom, frustration, a lot of thinking, followed by tests, and then going back home. You can volunteer. That there's me over there on the left in the white suit, delivering groceries for the building, and I also had a baby during the lockdown, so that was also quite exciting. All right, well, that was us. And, let's get to it then, Mark. So your first couple newsletters from China Chit-Chat, and you should subscribe to that if you haven't, does talk a little bit about balancing headquarters and local management. This presentation, will go a little bit deeper into that, but a lot of for example, the pictures and the memes are straight from Mark's head. So let's just start here. I think the key question that you want to, I guess, start off the conversation with is, should a foreign company who's has operations in China, should they keep control or should they not keep control? First, we'll start with this kind of like black and white question, but then sort of fill in the pockets of gray as we go on through this webinar. But let's just start here, Mark.
So I think, well, the advantage of being, locked up in a room for 2.5 months gives you time to think about things and reflection. And I think with the COVID, look, my best guess is it's not going to go away for at least, I think, people are talking about, I think it was 2 days ago, they've cut it in half the quarantine. So it's like 7 days plus 3 days. But, you don't know where that is. Like, I think Shenyang is still 14 plus 14. So, and I think the infrastructure that they've built, it can't be, I'm imagining that it won't be until end of next summer. And so, a thing which struck me was just how, within a short period of time, 2 years, how kind of distant China is to most people. So, a lot of people who are traveling to China once every 3 months or once every 4 months, they aren't doing it anymore. And then I think COVID also, if you look at, when we have, emailing to people about certain, events, we'll get quite a few emails that the person's email address has changed. So I think COVID also disrupted a lot of people's careers. Maybe not that much in China because it was kind of like frozen, it's kind of by itself. But like in Europe and America, a lot of people changed jobs and moved around. And so we got one client where the Chinese enterprise is relatively big, or the invested enterprise, and there's nobody in the home office in America who's ever visited or met anybody. So nobody knows, the people who kind of are in charge. And so I think that's one kind of big issue. But COVID just always speeds up and accentuates things. So I think, the people that die from COVID are normally vulnerable people. So it's also vulnerable businesses that get affected. And maybe it's also vulnerable systems. And I think, the old system of 20, 30 years ago, where you had a wholly foreign owned enterprise running in China, I don't know if it's going to be easy to continue, because China's a very dynamic, even with this COVID stuff, it changes a lot. Consumer sentiments change. It's moved from being, for many people, a place to manufacture for export to really a market which you want to sell into. And I think, especially if you're selling into the consumer market or to government, I don't know if the wholly foreign owned enterprise, it's easy to do. Of course, there's a chance, but I think it's very hard to micromanage, because how can you react to a problem or seize an opportunity if you have to wait for somebody, 5 rungs up the ladder?
We'll get into that, Mark. We'll get into that, but I like the themes here, because one of the things that I think we're going to discuss throughout the next couple slides are this question is not new for COVID. Should you keep control in HQ or should you release some to local management? This was an issue 30 years ago, like you mentioned, Mark. This was a question before COVID happened, and it has been renewed because of COVID, whether it's 2020 or 2022. So, each one of these eras are kind of, we're trying to approach this problem in today's time, of course, but also going to look back and see how what was similar and what is different between those stages of how did international companies address this issue throughout time, and also very recently. So, Mark, maybe you want to talk a little bit about this picture you found.
Well, I found that the guy, it's an Italian guy, did these photos of about 50 different like COVID posters. But there was others that were, you know, also fantastic. But like really, no visitors this year for Chinese New Year. Whoever comes to visit you is an enemy. Don't open your door to enemies. There were also things like if you have a visitor, you dishonor your parents. Some other poster was your pensions will be cut, all kinds of stuff. So I think, you know, in the West, you know, I was also locked down. So I've been locked down wherever I go, you know, I'm being locked down. And in the West, I think it was mostly like wash your hands and, you know, wash your hands while you sing happy birthday 2 times. So, yeah, obviously China takes COVID a lot more seriously than the West, I think, ever did. You know, I think the lockdown was tougher than, you know, the West. I mean, I don't think, I know. It was tougher, but it was shorter. And I think, you know, just one thing I would say is a lot of people are really just saying it's so inhuman how the Shanghai lockdown was. Yeah, it was a bit tougher, but in the West, I think people forget. Like, I've forgotten the Shanghai lockdown. I've only been away 2 weeks. But, you know, you forget. As soon as the restaurants open again, you kind of forget it. So I think, you know, if the China lockdown happened the same time as the lockdown was happening in Europe and America, people would have just not registered it. You know, and admittedly, not everybody knew about it. The taxi driver, you know, I told him, you know, when I got it in the airport, I just came from China, and I thought he'd say, oh, you know, I'm not even sure if he knew where China was, but yeah, he definitely didn't know there was a lockdown.
And yeah, just like you mentioned, Mark, that, you know, that it was announced that the quarantine time will be cut in half to 1 week plus, I think it's 7 plus 3. So yeah, it's you know, it is like you said, but you know, there are some glimpses of hope for going back to, you know, the old days pre-COVID. And so we've come to it now, I guess, Mark, and you've kind of alluded to this already here, which is, this is the conundrum, right? So we have kind of the issues of control regardless of COVID, not even considering COVID. But then when you add in, you know, travel restrictions and just the movement of people between, you know, jobs and people being stuck. Let's just say you have a foreign employee who was stuck in China for so long, and you know, he wants to go back home, or, you know, just the whole kind of spectrum of, I guess, ripple effects of the lockdown, of travel restrictions, of COVID. Then you get an issue of, you know, we point to it, we mentioned it here, but like corporate culture is affected by this, you know, keeping close connections with management and HQ is affected by this. These are very human things, Mark, you know, in another sense. This is not, we're not talking about business licenses or anything like, or compliance. We're talking about, you know, how does one keep that connection alive. So Mark, maybe you can just speak on this a little bit from your experience.
Yeah, well, I think kind of already said all I said. I think, you know, one thing which so I think it's been going for a long time. COVID's accentuated it, but I guess the dilemma is, you know, do we give more? You know, we're just talking about whether these foreign invested enterprises, whether they, you know, need to have, you know, expatriates running them or local management. And I think, you know, it's always been that the expatriates said, clearly you need expatriates, and the Chinese local management said, expatriates are useless. And probably, you know, neither is correct. So in the news there, when I wrote it, I talked about in-country leadership, because I think, you know, there are expatriate managers who are very effective, and there are local Chinese managers who are very effective. So I think that's difficult to say who's the better fit. And I guess we can discuss it later. There are some differences between the two, but I don't think it's a rule that expats, you know, are going to succeed and local Chinese managements, you know, will fail or whatever. So I think the real question is, how much oversight does the headquarters wish to have over the China operations, and how much can be run by people on the ground? And that makes it a bit more complicated. So, you know, it's not as easy as saying it's not just an HR decision, it's more a decision of power sharing.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we were talking a little bit before about the past and how, you know, this, how, I mean, China has changed a lot in the past 30 years, but also China has changed a lot in the past 2 years, one could say. So, you know, you mentioned in your newsletter, which I thought was kind of interesting, because, you know, you've seen it all, as essentially the challenges of doing business in China back then, you know, were, of course, unclear regulations, IP protection, you know, all of these issues, which are, I guess, I mean, these are still true today in some sense, right? But in addition to that, what you have now is also a much more competitive market. And so if you're talking about in-country leaders and, you know, making sure that you have the right management in place so that you can share power, finding the right talent is also going to be an issue. Not only from your, so competition breaks in both ways, like you say, like a competition from your actual business competitors, but also competition in trying to acquire the right talent, build the right team.
Yeah, so I think that the difference is here. So I think the real estate issues probably isn't a big issue. Probably like 20 years ago, that was a big issue. Now it's kind of, I think, you know, it's expensive, but it's, yeah, it's not like an issue like it used to be where it was not clear. And I think the big difference is this competition, but I think it's, you know, it's probably the sectors that are more complicated now, you know. So, you know, if you look at, I think if you wanted to set up a manufacturing for export, it's easy to do that with, you know, headquarter management, because the customers are headquarters customers, the technology is headquarters technology. So they could set up a, you know, a plant in Wuxi or Hangzhou, or wherever they want to set up their plant, and they can manufacture, sell for export, and, you know, then maybe some local sales. Yeah, that was the model 20 years ago. But if you look at the kind of clients who are coming through the door today, you know, the ones who are new entrants, they're in much more complicated areas, like not necessarily legally complicated, you know, stuff like, you know, selling cosmetics to companies. You know, if you're in a consumer-facing business, I think it's difficult to, you know, just be very run from Germany or America or something. I think you have to be more on the ground. And then I guess the other thing which has changed over the years is, you know, 20 years ago, you would have been competing with, you know, Japanese companies, you know, other European companies, American companies. But now you've got everybody coming in, plus, you know, the Chinese local companies, you know, really doing a lot. So, yeah, maybe 30 years ago or 20 years ago even, yeah, most Chinese people who'd studied overseas or done something, they probably would have liked to have worked for a foreign company. But now a lot of the bigger opportunities are working for a Chinese company or starting their own Chinese company. So it's just a much more complicated place than it was 30 years ago, you know, yeah, strangely enough.
I like this flow chart that you included. In addition to all of the stuff that you just mentioned, you know, even some of the smaller decisions, or what should be, you know, kind of straightforward decisions, can also be caught up into the whole mess of, you know, going back and forth with overseas HQ or, you know, local management, things like that. So maybe you can tell us the case, a little bit about the case of the client that this flowchart was inspired from.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you came around. I remember you telling me you didn't like the photo, but anyway, it's good to hear that you've changed your mind, sure. So yeah, we had this one client, which was a homeware company from Europe, like a mini IKEA, and it's very popular in its, you know, in its own geographies. And they set up, you know, in China, and their problem was they were looking for spaces about 250 square meters, and yeah, but the problem for those kind of companies is they're not like a draw card, like a LMVH or a Gucci or something. Yeah, the big malls want to have those guys to bring in the footfall. And so they were a company that was well known in Europe, but not known here. And it's not kind of the most exciting products, homeware products, you know, like an IKEA type range, but not being IKEA. But I think the real problem they had was they could never get a decent lease because firstly, people weren't chasing them, they had to chase. And so firstly, they'd have their local team find an opportunity. Then there would be like I missed a few steps. First, there would be a letter of intent that would go through a whole process, and then there would be the lease. And then firstly, the European lawyer would look at it. Then they send it us for Chinese review, where we would just normally say you can't do much because in China, I think if the mall or the landlord has a successful property, you cannot negotiate anything except like the commercial terms. If it's a really terrible mall, you can write your own lease because they just don't care. They're just desperate for anybody. So, but then we would do the review, then they would review our review, then they would negotiate the lease, and then it would go back and forth and back and forth. So this is actually a much shorter version. Then even the CEO would have to approve the lease, and then finally somebody would sign the lease. Whereas I think locally, they find an opportunity, they pay somebody the key money, they sign the lease the next day. So, this would take like a 3-month process. The other one would take a 3-day process.
Yeah, and I think I remember when you were coming up with this flow chart. I think my complaint was from the MNC side on the left was this is too long. It was more of a disbelief thing than
but it's much longer.
Critique.
If I really had the whole thing, but nobody could read it. Then it would have been another 8 steps in there.
Yeah, that's right. So we're coming to this section here, but I about managing your China operations, but mainly because in the second section, what we wanted to do was answer the question, should you or should you not, give up some control? And from this flow chart, it's just one case study, but also in addition to just some of these micro decisions, like, you don't want to micromanage China, like you said, Mark, but also the thing of the idea of that if you're not in China to just export back and sell back in your home country, you're actually trying to reach the Chinese consumer. I mean, if you're a consumer facing business in China for Chinese consumers, like you're going to need to, I think we've come to a conclusion that you need to have some local management or in-country leader, like you said. So with that kind of figured out, now we come to this part of, okay, we understand that, but now how do we manage that relationship so that it's the most effective? And I think I think this is going to be a much more delicate proposition, Mark, than just figuring out should I or should I not give control. But when you're actively managing this relationship, what kind of problems, what kind of issues do you see?
Well, I think, I think that the problem is there's obviously always opportunity, but there's also obviously risk. And, you see it now. I think H&M closed their big flagship shop in Shanghai, which is their first, but maybe a day ago or 2 days ago. So it shows you that even companies that were very successful aren't necessarily successful forever in China. And they also meet certain challenges. Like, H&M had that big consumer backlash because of the cotton issue. So, these are difficult things. So I think, it's nothing is easy. That's the first point. But I think the balance has to be, I don't know if we have a slide on. I did look at the slides before, but it's always hard to remember.
This one?
Okay. Yeah, that one. So I think, there were a few people I've met over the years who were also normally, they were like people that owned their company. Very often they were like a Mittelstand German company. And these guys said, I want our Chinese operations to operate like a Chinese family-owned company. But it really doesn't work for a foreign company. At least I don't think it would work because, the workplace culture in an MNC is, positive, diverse culture. Chinese private companies are really family-run. Whenever you deal with these family companies either on the other side of a deal, it's always a family member who makes the final decision or is rolled out for these things. Loyalty probably matters more than performance, whereas MNCs, there's so many performance stuff. The way that they do product development, this is all I'll let people look at it later. But I think these private entrepreneurs are much more dynamic. They might make a crazy decision, but they can reverse it in 6 minutes. Whereas, an MNC, they might take 6 months to make a decision and then 6 years to reverse something. So I think it's difficult to do these kind of things. So I think you have to, so I don't think that's a model that people can adopt, and I think, you probably, if you're a foreign company in China, your two routes are, if you want to stay as a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, not go down the joint venture route, which I think people are going to start doing as they think they have to get closer to the market. But let's say you're a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, you probably have to have the in-country management more trusted and more locked into the headquarters. So strangely enough, you'll be giving more control perhaps to the local management in China, but these local management will know better how you behave and have a closer relationship. And I think I don't know if it's here later, but one of the issues is why I think expats can still be very useful in this is they can often cooperate better. It is here. They can cooperate better with the headquarters and with the interaction. If somebody doesn't speak English or whatever, it's not saying negative about them, but if they require help from the headquarters, it's harder to have that conversation. And even if you know the top guy at headquarters, that person might not be able to solve your problem. So you've got to know a lot of people. So I think that's one of the issues is either a local Chinese person goes to headquarters for a number of years, builds up relationships in headquarters, becomes a known quantity. If you know somebody, you can trust them better, and then they can go to China, and then that person can react that way. And I think that's why you need to have that close connection, because otherwise it's not really your company if you're not closely connected.
I didn't include it in the slides, but when I was reading your newsletter, you mentioned, you just mentioned the Mittelstand companies and how even the Chinese managers who spend time, in the overseas HQ end up, wearing the clothes with the logo of the company on them on the weekends when they go, shopping and things like, they're very proud of, what they are doing and of the company. Is that, and you said earlier too, that, having this, those two styles from this slide right here, I mean, from the extremes, they're very, if you're looking at it from the extremes, they're not, there are some places where it's incompatible. So it is, like you said, hard to just adopt, the other side's practices. Do you think that, when we're talking about the solutions and Mittelstand, which is from your experience, a lot easier of a transition, for incorporating that corporate DNA in the local management, is that because you think like Mittelstand companies are family-owned businesses, and that there's a lot more overlap there, or what can people learn from the successful cases where companies have kind of injected that DNA into local management?
So I think those family-owned companies, they do share more of these kind of concepts, and probably they also, look, I can't say for sure, but I think they probably have a longer planning period, like they are, and they probably also place loyalty above short-term performance even. So, I think, it's not too uncommon for these companies to have those people come to, say, Germany quite regularly and even stay in Germany. Perhaps one thing which is what companies are missing is, it'd be great, I think, if Chinese employees would go to headquarters and have a non-China role, like have a role, I don't know, selling to Turkey or something, to make them a bit broader and not always pigeonhole them. But I think that's the reason why those companies do it well, whereas a lot of other companies, it's like, well, it's a problem. If I send that guy to America, who's going to do his job for the year or two, and it's a short-term performance issue. Whereas, if you send the person for 2 years, expats will not, most expats stay 3 years plus 3 or something like that. but yeah, they're not going to last forever. So as developing that local talent who will stay in China, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense in the short term. It's a short-term hassle for a long-term benefit. And I think that's difficult for larger corporations often. I mean, it shouldn't be, but it's a hassle, and that's why they don't do it, I think.
That's interesting. So in addition to this possible solution, with the next few slides, we'll talk about the good and the bad and the ugly. What can we learn about the good management, bad management, and ugly management from case studies that you have personally worked on, Mark? So, I mean, let's just start with the good, because we're trying to learn what are we looking for? So what is the common thread? I see on the bottom here, you write, it's not much fun to write about and talk about. In fact, sometimes the good thing is the boring thing, but maybe we can discuss some of the commonalities that you've seen from good managers.
Yeah. So I think the good, it's like it's just that they don't have bad qualities, so it's a bit neutral. So they don't do stupid. They don't have such a big ego. And I think the thing is, sometimes you have people that really want to run a business like their own business, and then this kind of entrepreneurial mindset. It's nice, but I think in a foreign invested enterprise, it has to be tempered with oversight, because it's not your capital at risk. It's not your family's business. Your name's not on the door. So, if you do things which are crazy, that reflects on a bigger, corporation. And, obviously the family owner, they should be doing the crazy things, not, some outpost somewhere. So I think, the successful general managers, I used to see general managers much more. I think over the years, things just, law firms, perhaps are not as involved day to day with a lot of the managers, and we deal a lot more with head office. But I think, the ones which I noticed were, people that can engage with their colleagues, both in China and at the headquarters. So, acting, as a bridge. I'm always a little bit concerned if a general manager wants to be the only point of contact with headquarters, that, everybody reports to that person and that person reports to the headquarters. I think they have to be flexible. So it's difficult, because this is not like management bylaws. You can't tell people everything that might happen. I think, it's got to be somebody knows what your company can't do, and they need to know when they have to get help. They can't be so, in handcuffs that they can't make any little decision, but they need to know when they reach out. And I guess they need to know who to reach out to, because these companies are complicated. You don't have to go to the chairman of the board for a supply issue. Maybe you talk to the procurement guy, in Washington or something. So it's a bit about knowing when to ask and who to ask. And then I think prioritizing issues. Some people get nervous about everything. Others get nervous about nothing until the police, walk through the door. And then I think, credibility with headquarters is important. And that's why I think these things all matter. So the better people, that you've got experience with them, then they feel more comfortable. So it's not easy, but that's where I think companies probably don't invest a lot. Some companies, they'll just hire people and then there'll be a new person 18 months later. And that's impossible. I mean, I can't imagine how you could actually really, trust a manager that you don't even know who the person is. It's difficult.
And I think, like you said, sometimes it's hard to define what is a good manager, but the easiest way is probably just that he doesn't do bad things. So here we have some of the bad traits that you've seen throughout your career here in China physically. Maybe we can talk about these three specific ones and the case studies that coincide.
So I think like the good ones, they all kind of resemble each other. I mean, it's like, pretty much, but bad ones, it could be anything. I mean, it could be somebody is, I don't know, I guess the ugly has more even than the bad. But I think, things that you sometimes see is the people that can't seek assistance and, want to be the hero, the people that will continue. I don't think these are bad people. These are just people that, you know, and even when there's a problem, they won't reach out until it's far too late. So they want to own the problem and then hope it solves itself. And, you know, it's strange. I think it's very strange. I don't understand it, to tell the truth. So, you know, I think if you're in that role as a general manager for a foreign company, I would be trying to share the shrapnel with everybody. If there's a problem, let them know as soon as you know, and be proactive. But I think it's very frustrating that, you know, these managers that keep it to themselves, often don't do much, hope it will pass, and yeah, that's bad. And then observe, not do. That's the alternative, I guess, is there's some people that just kind of cry about everything and never take any action and are very, very passive. So I realize it's not very helpful because, you know, on the one hand, I say, you know, people, the worst type of bad manager is the one who's the hero who wants to do everything himself. But on the other hand, the other bad one is the one who does nothing and just, you know, transcribes and complains all the time. So I think that's why the balance is important.
You know, I think a lot of these are pretty true, you know, just eternally. But do you think that they're more especially true, like during, you know, time, like since 2020, for example, since, you know, the first COVID, and especially considering travel restrictions, and, you know, is it easier for these bad traits? And we'll get to the ugly traits soon too. But like you said, these bad ones are not necessarily like, you know, they're not evil or, you know, anything like that, but they're just, I guess, more like bad habits. You know, do they crop up more because of COVID? Just, I know it's just an opinion.
Yeah, but I think it's like some of these things. Yeah, like I said, that one company where there's nobody they know at head office, and yeah, to be fair, their major concern wasn't whether we can make good decisions for business. It was more like, who's going to decide on our bonuses? Like, you know, how are we going to get our bonuses and things like that. But, you know, I think if, you know, COVID has actually removed and isolated the China business, well, then it's difficult to seek assistance if nobody knows who to seek the assistance from. And if the person who's got the role doesn't care or doesn't know anybody. So it's a messy thing. I don't know what the solution is. But, you know, I think, yeah, COVID would have accentuated all of these problems. And probably for people who are more passive, well, you know, COVID probably didn't require you to make a lot of quicker decisions and, you know, on the ground and informed decisions. Because very often the managers here, they're not, in China, they're not very good at, you know, preparing or, you know, even informing. You know, not all local managers, but yeah, there are local Chinese managers who asked us, you know, in the past to change the way that we give our advice because we didn't want to confuse headquarters. You know, so sometimes people want to slant the information to support their decision and not give people the full information. So I guess these kind of issues, you know, arise in COVID as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, although we're saying that these are bad traits for the managers, you know, like you just mentioned, the difficulty in seeking assistance, this is something that can be proactively addressed by HQ. You know, they should be able to let them know that you know, they're available and who to talk to. You know, like you say, you don't need to contact the chairman if you have a procurement issue. So, you know, that people are aware, that the managers are aware of, you know, who should they report to, and just generally be available and proactive in the relationship as well. And this is the last slide here, but it is quite a doozy. These are, I guess, the can you, maybe these people cannot be saved. I don't know. But these are the ugly. This is something that is not just bad habits, but this is just wrong. And I know that you have stories behind each of these, Mark, so maybe you can go through the list and share with us.
Well, I think the story, maybe time won't allow for the stories, but I mean, I think some common categories I would include is the partner. And I think this is something which will be interesting to see how this works out. And basically, the general manager is a partner, and I'm talking about wholly foreign-owned enterprises, but I guess I could talk about joint ventures. But the thing is, if the general manager is left alone too much and makes too many decisions by themselves and has very little oversight and is kind of treated like, he's our hero and all this, it can over time change their perception from being an employee to being a partner. And one of the reasons why I really suggest to people is I would ideally not have the local management, in-country management, be it an expat or a Chinese national, in the board. I would just say, it's not difficult to have a board with non-residents or whatever, but having those people in the same two organs, it's a little bit messy. I think we want to make people realize they work for the company, not that they're the partner of the company. And this often doesn't, it doesn't trigger, immediately a problem, but it becomes a problem over time. So one client we had, and if people are interested, we can send them the deck with that case. I don't think the guy started off wrong, but it was a German company. This guy had studied in Germany, so they, trusted him a lot. And then he did a deal where he was the general manager. His wife was the CFO, which, that's kind of crazy. And the Germans said, it's like we're getting two for the price of one. And you're thinking, well, that's not a good idea. And then even to make it worse, what we see quite often is the local management were actually shareholders at the Hong Kong level. So the wholly foreign-owned enterprise was kind of a joint venture. Anyway, in the Articles of Association, it said the general manager could only be removed with unanimous board decision. And since he was a director, that wasn't going to happen. And so when the client finally found out that, the guy had become, a thief, so he went into the next category. So basically, they were selling complicated products where they were making a loss on selling the product, and this other company was making all the money and margin on after-sales services, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, long story short, we looked into it. The CFO wife was the landlord. He owned the company with his father that was making the money. And then it was quite a complicated way to remove him. So, so that's one kind of case where, I think people will be moving to a joint venture. We're having a gaming company at the moment looking at China, very restricted field. They have an employee who's been there for a long time. Probably that relationship, it would make more sense to make it like a quasi joint venture where he has his interest, they have their interest, and people at least know where they stand. Because you don't want a joint venture and you don't know that it is a joint venture. So, if somebody wants to be the entrepreneur, they should also face, they should be aligned. It can't be they just succeed. So that's the partner. And that can happen in many different ways. And then I think the thief is, embezzlement. I'd say this has come up a lot more. And it's not just general managers. I'd say the part of the business that has grown the most in the last 2 years is a lot of procurement fraud cases, a lot of anonymous whistleblowers. I don't know if those whistleblowers, I don't know if it really means that there's more of this going on because there's less oversight, or it's just that more and more people are in a bad mood and they want to take it out on somebody. But, there is a lot of embezzlement. If you don't have the right, checks and balances, I think we did a recent newsletter where we asked some different external experts for some advice how they address it, by outsourcing or regular, checks and things like that. And then I guess the megalomaniac, I haven't seen him that often, but I think it's always the funniest story. But that's really the kind of person who's the superhero, not just a hero, but is a superhero and just does everything like he's the emperor of this business. And, I think the hero can survive in a normal company, but the megalomaniac can only survive if he or she, and I think I've only ever met men who are this, but anyway, if he has champions in the head office, people will look at these plans and say, this is a bit of a crazy policy, and then they'll be just, you're racist, or you don't understand China, all this kind of stuff. So, I think that the problem for Western companies is a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, I think by its nature, it can't be too transformative. You know, if you really want to transform it, you probably will need to do a joint venture where you have a minority stake and you let a Chinese company run the business. I think, you know, I just find it hard to believe that, you know, having a megalomaniac in charge of a woofie will have a long-term success. You know, I've never seen it, but yeah.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in chat. But I'll just raise one more thing, Mark. You know, the partner, the thief, and the megalomaniac, I think probably can be exacerbated because of, you know, the travel restrictions, because of lockdown, because of the, you know, just a lost contact with home base, or even just people moving around because of, take your pick of any reason, essentially, especially if it's an expat local manager who went back home, for example, and then you replaced them. So, you know, once it reaches this level, once it reaches the ugly level, I kind of can guess what you're going to say, but, you know, when we talk about the bad characteristics, you know, you can possibly work it out through some initiative, right? But once it gets to the ugly, what does one company do if they should find themselves, you know, facing this barrel of the gun?
Well, I think that could be a whole different thing. But just very briefly on this, I think these kind of people, it's gone too far. So we're talking about separation, and I think one has to be, you know, you don't rush to do things, you plan things. So, you know, when we've had this in the past, I guess now it's a bit different. You know, one of the old plans was we would invite the person to come to head office for a meeting, thinking it's all okay. And while that person is on the plane to, say, America, we take over the office and take physical. Because yeah, I remember once there was a guy in Anhui province, he was an American, and he was totally corrupt. And, you know, the German company, they said, oh, we're going to fix him. We're going to really take him. You know? And so then they, strangely enough, you know, gave him 6 weeks notice that he's coming. It was kind of clear what they were up to. And of course, by the time they arrived, he was gone, the chops were gone, the business license was gone, all the records were gone. And, you know, that was not the best way to approach it. So I think we have to also think, you know, with these people, and if the China business is important, they can do a lot of damage. So it's not just enough to say, we're going to terminate you or be the tough guy. You have to think about, what does it mean? And, you know, in some cases, they can even just draw away the business. We had this one case where the general manager was sacked. And what she did was she set up another company in the same building, hired the staff, locked the other office, and just dragged the whole business to a new entity, even with like criminal intent, and just, you know, left a husk and took the whole business over. So you have to think a bit. You can't just, you know, naively, you know, terminate somebody and think it's over. Have to be a little bit careful with these things.
That's a great insight. All right. Well, everybody who registered on this for this webinar on the Eventbrite registration link will get a copy of this presentation, as always. The links are here, so this webinar will be uploaded onto YouTube. But also, if you are interested to check out Mark's newsletter, which is weekly, I think, Mark?
Weekly, yes.
Yeah, weekly. So if you need more Mark in your life, like I do, then click that Substack link over there in the middle of the slide and subscribe to the newsletter and share it with a friend. I just put your friends' emails too while you're at it. Yeah. All right, thanks a lot, Mark.
Your enemies, like, you can clog up their email box with, you know, yeah.
Friends, enemies,
whatever.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. We'll come back in another 2 weeks with maybe a new maybe we'll talk about the supply chain, like you mentioned, Mark. All right, thanks a lot, everybody.
That's good. Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
See ya.
Did everybody